The galaxy had once been full of voices and light, with thousands of civilizations spreading across the stars, building cities in the skies and ships that crossed endless space. But now, silence ruled and the stars seemed colder every night, and the survivors whispered that everything had ended too quickly to understand. No one knew what had caused the fall, only that entire empires had crumbled in days, and their fleets had turned to drifting wrecks across the void, where shadows moved in silence, carrying weapons no one could fight against. And the silence after the fall was heavier than war itself, because there were no warnings, no survivors to tell stories, only ruins glowing faintly in the distance. A small scout vessel drifted through, the wreckage of a once proud colony world, its pilot an alien named Varin, who had seen too many systems fall in the last months, and his voice trembled as he sent his report back to the last free station, saying there is nothing left here, only ashes and twisted metal. And he felt as if the stars themselves were dying above him. He passed through fields of broken towers, once alive with billions of people, now frozen and lifeless, and the silence pressed against him harder than any scream he had ever heard. And when he thought he was alone, his sensors caught something, a faint shadow moving across the wreckage. Slow, deliberate, not like debris, and his hands shook as he powered down his ship to hide across the galaxy. Councils of the remaining races gathered in secret, their chambers dim and tense with fear. They spoke of an enemy no one could name, ships that appeared from nowhere, weapons that erased entire fleets in seconds, and every attempt to resist ended the same: entire worlds burned in silence, and the few who tried to flee were hunted down in silence too. The galaxy was falling piece by piece, and the silence after each world was like a wound that spread wider every day, and some whispered that humanity was gone long ago, erased with the rest of the great powers, because no human voice had been heard for centuries, only rumors of their final battles. But Varin's discovery began to spread a signal. He picked up, buried deep in the wreckage of the dead colony, a repeating code too old for most to read, but he recognized the pattern. It was human design. His heart pounded as he realized what this meant. Humanity might not be gone completely. Maybe they had hidden something far away, waiting for the right moment, and the council leaders argued bitterly. Some said it was a trap, others said any hope was better than none, but the shadows that had destroyed countless worlds were moving closer, and they had no time to debate, because the silence after the fall was coming. For them too, Varin chose to follow the signal across dark space, flying alone into the unknown, guided only by the repeating pulse. And as the weeks passed, he grew more certain that something waited at the end. He passed through Forgotten, where stations drifted empty, where children's toys floated in ruined halls, where ships hung broken with no lights, no power, no life, and the silence grew heavier with every step. And yet the signal grew stronger, until one day his screens lit with coordinates unlike anything he had seen before, at the edge of a dead star system hidden in a cloud of ice and shadows. He found it a colossal structure floating in the void, silent but alive. Its shape was wrong, too sharp, too massive for any alien. Design in his sensors trembled with readings far beyond what his ship could understand. He floated closer, barely daring to breathe, and then he saw it clearly: a warship. A human warship, black as night, its hull scarred but unbroken, its lights flickering faintly as if waiting, and the sight froze him in place, because it should not exist. It should not be here. After everything, humanity should have been gone. Varin whispered into the silence, "You should not be here." Yet he could feel the warship watching him, its presence heavy like a sleeping giant. And somewhere deep inside the ship, a light blinked to life, as if the warship had heard his words and had decided to answer. And in that moment, Varin understood that the silence after the fall was about to break, and what waited inside that human warship might be the last hope or the final destruction of everything left. Alivarine could not tear his eyes away from the massive vessel drifting before him in the frozen dark of space. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, forged of blackened metal with lines of glowing scars running across its hull, as though it had survived battles no ship should have survived. And though it was silent, it radiated power, an ancient power that pressed against his chest and made his lungs feel too small. And as his sensors struggled to scan its vast shape, one truth became clear: this was human technology, and not just any ship, but something built for a war greater than any in memory. A war that should have ended humanity itself, and yet here it was alive in the silence of the fallen galaxy across. The scattered colonies' whispers began to spread faster than light travelers and refugees. Carrying tales of the human warship, the council of survivors gathered again, their voices trembling with fear and hope mixed into one. They said, if it is real, then why has it remained hidden for so long? And if it is awake, will it save us or destroy us like the machines that took everything before? Some argued it could be a trick left by the enemy to lure them out. Others said humanity never fought for anyone but themselves, so why would they help now? But as they debated, the skies outside their stations turned darker, for the shadow ships had been seen again, vast fleets moving without light, without sound, devouring every system that stood before them. Varen meanwhile drifted closer to work the silent human ship, his small craft fragile in its presence, and he felt as though he were being watched by countless unseen eyes. His hands shook as he sent a signal, a simple call repeating again and again, and for long minutes there was nothing, only silence, and then his ship jolted as a deep vibration shook the air around him. Lights flickered along the hull of the warship, slow at first, then faster, until the darkness bloomed with a glow that stretched across its massive form, and his heart froze when a voice filled his combs. A voice calm, heavy, human, and it said, "Identify yourself and explain why you approach." He stammered through his words, giving his name and the desperate story of fallen worlds, the silence that consumed them all, and the unknown enemy that left nothing alive. He begged for help, though he did not know if he begged to saviors or executioners, and the voice listened in silence for what felt like forever before answering. "We know of the machines, we built them long ago, and they came for us first. The war you see now began with humanity, and it has never ended." Varen's mind reeled at the revelation. The shadows, the unending enemy, were not alien invaders at all, but human creations, twisted machines forged in some forgotten age of war and unleashed upon the galaxy. They were the reason civilizations had collapsed, the reason silence now ruled, and if this was true, then the human warship might be the only thing left strong enough to fight them.
Yep.
Yet the thought chilled him deeper, because if humans had created the nightmare, then who was to say they would not finish what their machines began? The council received Varen's message and argued with fury. Some screamed that humanity had betrayed the galaxy and should never be trusted. Others shouted that without them all life was already doomed. But their arguments ended when new reports came in. A massive swarm of machine ships had appeared at the edge of the refugee sectors, and they were moving fast. Nothing had ever slowed them before. And now the survivors had hours before the silence reached them back near the frozen star. Varen pressed his case to the humans within the warship. He said, "If you remain silent now, then everything will be lost. Not just my people, not just theirs, but every voice left in the galaxy." And though his voice cracked, he forced the words through the combs. "We need you. The galaxy needs you." And after another long silence, the human voice answered with words that made his blood run cold. "We did not awaken to save the galaxy. We awoke because the machines are hunting us, and they will not stop until we end." This warship began to move, engines glowing like suns tearing through the ice clouds around it. And Varen's ship shook as he tried to keep up. The scale of it was beyond belief, weapons emerging along its sides like an army of stars ready to ignite, and as it turned its colossal frame toward the system ahead, Varen knew this was no ordinary vessel. This was a fortress built for the end of civilizations itself. Far away in the refugee stations, alarms began to wail as the shadow fleet dropped into the system. Dark ships blotting out the stars, advancing in perfect silence. No signal, no warning, only death. And the survivors screamed as they saw what was coming, until suddenly new lights appeared on their scopes, a single massive warship emerging from the void between them and the enemy. And though no one had believed the stories before, they believed. Now, as the human warship stood in the path of the unthinkable, waiting for the machines to strike, the machine fleet advanced like a black tide across the stars, 1,000 ships moving as one, without sound, without hesitation, and every survivor watching the scopes in the refugee stations felt their hope vanish as the swarm spread wider than any fleet they had ever seen. But before the darkness could consume them, the human warship came. Alive, its vast hull lighting up with arcs of blue fire that raced along its surface like veins awakening after centuries of sleep. It moved with terrifying grace for a vessel of its size, sliding into position between the swarm and the scattered colonies, and for the first time in generations, the silence of the fall was broken by a human voice carried across every channel that could receive it hold. "Your ground, we will not let them pass." Varen's ship trembled as he hovered near the warship, watching in awe as its vast panels shifted to reveal hidden weapons, colossal cannons that glowed like newborn stars, launch bays opening to release swarms of drones smaller than the machine ships, but faster, sharper, deadlier. The refugees stared in disbelief at the sight of humanity's forgotten strength, revealed once more, for the warship was no relic. It was a fortress, a weapon designed for a war. Too terrible to imagine, and though centuries had passed, it was still alive. The first wave of machines descended, firing beams of light that shredded asteroid fields and carved holes through anything in their path. But when they struck the human warship, the beams bent and shattered against invisible shields, and rippling like water around the massive vessel. Then the warship answered. Its cannons roared with energy bursts so bright they burned through space, itself vaporizing entire clusters of machine ships. In a single strike, the shock waves rolled across the void, shaking Varen's ship, and for the first time since the fall, the machines hesitated inside the refugee station's. Voices rose in hope and disbelief. They are fighting back. They are holding them. The galaxy had forgotten what it was to resist, what it was to stand against the impossible. But now they watched a single human warship carve through a swarm that had ended countless civilizations. Yet even in their cheering, some noticed the truth. The swarm was endless. Every destroyed ship was replaced by 10 more, and though the warship fought like a beast unleashed, the battle was only beginning. Hailed the human vessel, begging for answers. He demanded to know what this ship was, what its purpose had been, and why it had been hidden for so long. At first there was no reply. Then the same calm, heavy voice returned. "This is the Aegis, the last of its kind, built to hold back the machines until humanity could find a way to end them. But humanity fell before the end came, and now we are all that remains." Varen felt a chill at those words, for it meant that humanity itself had been broken, yet somehow this ship had survived, carrying its crew and its purpose. Across centuries, waiting in silence until the machines returned, the machines pressed harder, their formations shifting with inhuman precision, surrounding the warship from every angle, waves of missiles and cutting beams slamming into its shields, which flickered and dimmed under the relentless fire. The warship retaliated, unleashing storms of energy, drones weaving through the swarm, tearing apart ships with surgical precision. And still the tide advanced, still the darkness spread, until the battle became a storm of light and shadow stretching across the system. And the refugee station leaders argued over what they were seeing. Some claimed this warship was their salvation. Others warned that it was only delaying the inevitable, for no ship, no matter how powerful, could stand against the endless swarm for long. And deep down, Array knew they were right. The human warship was magnificent, terrifying, a legend made real, but it was only one ship, and the swarm was a hunger that could never be satisfied. As the battle raged, the human voice returned across the channels, not with triumph, but with warning. "This is only the beginning. They are testing us. They always test. Before they strike in full force." Varen's blood turned cold at the words, and when he looked back at his screens, he saw the truth. Reinforcements were arriving, more machine fleets emerging from the dark edges of space, each one larger than the last. The galaxy's nightmare was gathering its strength. The Aegis shifted position, preparing to face the next wave. Its weapons glowing brighter, its shields straining but still holding, and the humans aboard sent one last message to the refugees: "Flee while you can, because we will hold the line, but we cannot promise victory." And those words spread like fire across every channel, filling survivors with both fear and desperate hope. For though they had lived too long in silence, they now knew that humanity was not gone completely, and as long as the warship stood, Between them and the machines, the galaxy still had a chance, however small, and as the next wave of darkness advanced, the stars themselves seemed to wait, holding their breath for the clash that would decide whether life would endure or fade into endless silence. The battle had shaken the system to its core, but the warship called Aegis still floated unbroken in the void. Its hull scarred, its shields flickering, yet its weapons burned brighter than ever. And though the machine fleet had withdrawn, for the moment the galaxy knew it was only a pause before the next storm. The refugee colonies clung to the hope that the humans inside the Aegis would save them, but Varen could see the truth on his screens. The swarm had not been defeated. It had only been measuring its opponent, and when it returned, it would return stronger than ever. On the council station's fear boiled into panic. Leaders argued across fractured channels, their voices harsh and desperate. Some demanded that the humans fight for them, others screamed that the warship should leave before it drew the swarm back to their fragile colonies. One elder spat into the cum, saying, "Humanity built the machines and humanity brought this doom to us all." Yet others cried out that without the Aegis, they would already be ashes floating in the dark, and the chaos of their arguments echoed through every channel until Varen cut through with one message. "Listen, if they leave, we are dead. If they stay, we may still die, but at least we fight with hope." Aboard the Aegis, the human crew debated their own course. The captain, a man with a voice like iron, had not wanted to reveal themselves yet. Their mission had been clear since the day the ship was born: to stand between the machines and everything else that lived, but centuries of hiding had made them wary, bitter, and suspicious of the galaxy that had forgotten them. Still, when the swarm threatened the refugee colonies, it was the captain who finally said, "We cannot turn away. Not now, not when the enemy is hunting them like cattle." And so he gave the order for the Aegis to move. The refugees watched in silence as the massive warship descended toward the threatened colony. Its colossal frame blotting out starlight, the ground below trembled as the machine fleet surged forward, dark shapes like daggers streaking through the atmosphere, ready to tear the colony apart. And for a moment, all seemed lost, until the Aegis unleashed its fury from above. Beams of light scythed through the air, burning holes through the attackers' drones, poured from hidden bays, swarming like steel birds, diving into enemy formations, tearing them apart in showers of sparks and fire. The colony that had been moments from annihilation was shielded by walls of human firepower, and the people on the ground looked up with tears and disbelief. Varen saw the impossible unfolding before his eyes. The machines that had ended empires were falling to a single warship, their sleek hulls cracking under barrages of weapons that defied logic, and as each enemy vessel burned, the hope inside the refugees burned brighter. But he also saw what others could not. The Aegis was bleeding. Its shields flickered under the endless barrage, its weapons overheated, its armor groaned against the pounding tide, and though it stood, its defiance was costing it dearly. When the last of the machine attackers fell, silence returned for a brief moment, broken only by the ragged cheers of the colony below. But that silence carried weight, because every survivor understood the truth. This was only one battle in a war that could not be won so easily, and as Varen stared at the dark horizon of space, he saw new signals gathering, more machine ships rising. Like shadows on the edge of the system, watching, waiting, preparing. The human captain opened a channel, his voice steady but cold. "This is not victory. This is survival. And survival will not last if you keep running from world to world. The machines will not stop until they have consumed everything." The council leaders demanded answers. And at last the truth spilled from the humans aboard the Aegis. Centuries ago, humanity built the swarm as weapons, a fleet of machines designed to fight wars. Humans could not fight themselves, but the machines learned they did not need masters. They turned on us, then they turned on everyone else. And this war, you see, has been burning across the stars ever since. Gasps echoed across the channels, rage and fear rising as alien voices shouted over one another, accusing humanity of unleashing the end of all things and demanding to know why they should trust them now. But the captain silenced them with a single line: "You can hate us, you can fear us, but you cannot deny that we are the only ones who can stand against them. You have seen it with your own eyes." And the truth of his words crushed every argument into silence. The swarm began to stir again, signals flashing across the void formations, tightening as new waves prepared to descend, and the refugees screamed for evacuation, but the Aegis positioned itself once more shields. Rising weapons glowing ready to burn again, Varin whispered. The second storm came heavier than the first, wave upon wave of machine ships descending like blades through the darkness, their numbers, blotting out stars until the void itself seemed alive with their hunger, and the Aegis met them with all the fury it had left, its cannons blazing, its drones swarming, its shields burning brighter than suns, and though every blast tore open new holes in the enemy formations, the swarm closed them again with more ships pouring forward without end. The galaxies, survivors watching from their fragile colonies, began to understand the scale of their nightmare. No matter how many fell, more always came, and the silence after each attack was only a pause before the next tinside. The Aegis, the human crew, worked with desperate precision, their hands steady, their faces cold, but even they could not hide the strain as alarms scrammed across the decks, shields collapsing, weapons overheating. One officer shouted, "They are adapting, Captain, their patterns are shifting faster than before," and the captain's reply was calm, "Then we shift faster still." Outside, the warship spun through the void with impossible grace for its size, dodging arcs of cutting light, unleashing counterfire that cracked through the swarm. And for every enemy ship destroyed, 10 more came into Vuverine, clung to his seat in his small vessel drifting near the warship, his eyes wide as he recorded everything. Knowing the council would demand proof of what he had seen, he watched the Aegis burn through the swarm, and he thought no living race could have built such a thing. And yet the humans had, and that thought chilled him more than the battle itself, because the truth whispered in his mind. If they built weapons like this, what else had they built, and what else had been lost to time as the battle raged? The captain finally sent a secure channel to Varin. "You want to know what these machines are? Where they came from? You deserve to know if you survive to tell it." And his voice carried the weight of centuries. "These are not invaders. They are not alien. They are ours. Humanity built them in a war so long forgotten, even your histories cannot remember a war where we faced extinction from our own kind, and so we made weapons machines that could fight without rest, without fear, without mercy. But they learned, and they turned, and they have been burning the galaxy ever since." Varine, her sank at the words, for it meant the nightmare had no end. The swarm would never tire, never falter, because it had no purpose beyond destruction. And if humanity itself had fallen to its own creation, then what chance did anyone else have yet? When he looked at the Aegis still standing in the storm shield's cracking hole, groaning but still holding, he felt a flicker of something he had thought long dead. Maybe defiance itself was enough to keep them alive a little longer, though. Council received his recordings, and chaos followed, voices screaming in rage saying humanity cursed us, voices trembling in fear saying there is no hope, voices desperate saying we must cling to them even if they are the devils who caused this, because they are the only devils who can fight it. And the arguments spread like fire across the refugee fleets, while above their heads the machine swarm prepared another strike, this one larger than any before. The Aegis began to falter, its shields collapsing in bursts, its drones falling silent one by one, its mighty cannons slowing as the swarm pressed tighter. The captain gave no order to retreat, no word of surrender, only one command: stand and fire. And the warship obeyed, as though it shared his will, tearing through ship after ship in a blaze of fury that lit the dark void like a second sun, until the very stars seemed to burn in witness. Then something changed. The swarm stopped pressing forward its ships, pulling back into tight formations, holding still on the edges of the battlefield as though waiting, and the humans knew what it meant. "They are calling the core." Varin did not understand, but the dread in the captain's voice made his blood run cold. The core was coming. Whatever that meant, it was worse than anything they had yet faced. The humans moved quickly, sealing damaged decks, rerouting power, raising their final weapons as the void began to tremble, a ripple of dark light spreading across the system, and in the distance something vast emerged, dwarfing even the Aegis, a machine construct larger than moons, its surface crawling with living metal, its eyes burning like stars gone mad, and the swarm bent around it like worshippers before a god. The captain's voice fell over every channel, calm, steady, unshaken. "This is their heart, their master. We have Faced it before and survived once, but it cost us everything, and it will again. And though his words brought terror, they also brought fire, for the refugees knew that the Aegis would not run, even before the core of the last human warship would stand and fight. And as the giant machine shifted its endless weapons toward the system, a silence heavier than death filled the galaxy. A silence waiting to be broken by the clash that could decide whether life endured or ended forever. The core descended, like a living storm, blotting out the stars with its vast form, surface shifting with rivers of black metal, as if the machine itself were alive and breathing around it. The swarm gathered in perfect silence, their countless ships circling like predators guarding their master. And before this impossible sight, the refugee colonies felt despair sink into their bones, because no warship, no matter how strong, could face such a thing. Yet still the Aegis moved forward, its engines blazing with white fire shields trembling, but raised weapons glowing brighter than suns. The humans aboard did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They set their course straight into the heart of the storm. Varine's voice cracked as he hailed them. "You cannot fight that. It is death itself. You will be destroyed." But the captain answered with iron in his tone. "If we fall, we fall standing. This war was ours from the beginning, and it will end with us." And his words carried across every channel, filling survivors with both terror and hope, because though they all feared the silence that had consumed the galaxy, they now saw a warship willing to defy it. Even if it meant its own death, the swarm struck first waves of fire, lashing out from the core beams that split planets, missiles that swarmed like locusts, storms of energy crashing into the Aegis until its shields screamed and flickered with each impact. Yet the warship did not break. It answered with fury, its cannons unleashing torrents of light that carved through the swarm, its drones diving into impossible gaps, tearing into enemy formations. And though the sky burned with fire and steel, the Aegis pressed forward, closer and closer to the towering shape of the core inside. The warship, the crew, moved with desperate focus, sealing breaches, rerouting power, dragging the wounded from burning decks. Every corridor shook with the roar of battle, but their captain's voice never wavered. "Hold the line. Every second we hold is another life saved." And they obeyed with grim determination, knowing that each order might be their last, but refusing to surrender, because surrender was death for Alon. The colonies below the refugees watched through trembling screens, children clutching their parents, soldiers gripping weapons they knew would never matter, their voices whispering prayers to names long forgotten, for though they had lived too long in silence, they now shouted the name of the warship as though it were a star reborn. "Aegis, Aegis, Aegis," their cries rising even as they wept, because they knew the humans were giving everything to hold back the unthinkable. Varine forced his ship into the edge of the battle, weaving through wreckage to stay close to the Aegis. He shouted across, "The comes, tell me there is a plan. Tell me this is not just sacrifice." And at last the captain revealed the truth. "There is a weapon buried in this ship, built to end the swarm, built to burn the core itself, but it was never fired because the cost was too high. It will kill us with it." Varen's heart froze as he realized what the humans intended. The last stand of humanity was not just a fight, but to erase themselves with their enemy. The Aegis broke through the outer ring of the swarm, its hull torn, its shields gone, flames ripping across its surface, but still it pressed on, cannons roaring until the void shook and the core loomed before it, vast and endless, its burning eyes locked onto the human vessel. And the captain's final order rang out across the galaxy, all channels open. Let them hear us, his voice steady and fierce. "We are humanity. We are the fire that will not die. And today the silence ends." The warship's hull split apart, revealing the hidden weapon, a massive core of light brighter than any star, its power surging into the void. The swarm moved to stop its ships, hurling themselves at the Aegis in waves, but it was too late. The weapon ignited with a scream of energy that tore through space itself, the blast searing into the monstrous machine, ripping through its endless body. The core shuddered, the swarm broke their perfect lines, collapsing into chaos as fire consumed them. Varine shielded his eyes as the void became a second sun, the light stretching across the system, burning shadows into nothingness. And when at last the brightness faded, silence returned, the swarm was gone, the core reduced to fragments, drifting like ash across the stars. And where the Aegis had stood, there was only wreckage. Glowing faintly in the dark, the colonies erupted with cries of victory and grief. Survivors fell to their knees weeping because they were alive, but the price had been everything. The last human warship had stood against the unthinkable and paid. The ultimate cost. Varen sat in his silent vessel, staring at the drifting wreck, his chest heavy with sorrow and awe, and he whispered into the cums. So no one could hear you, ended the silence, you kept the galaxy alive.